You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. The first inkling that the world had tilted off its axis arrived via the synthesized cheerfulness of my navigation system. "You have arrived," it chirped, while my headlights illuminated nothing but a weed-choked track dissolving into woods thick with mist and shadow. The second tremor of wrongness followed the slow dawning realization that an hour had bled away since I'd last glimpsed another vehicle, a dwelling, or even the faded reassurance of a highway marker. But only upon coasting into the spectral, time-lost hamlet did the profound nature of my displacement truly crystallize. My name is Elias. Ordinarily, I'm a cartographer of my own days, charting every hour with meticulous care. Yet that particular Friday afternoon, seized by an uncharacteristic gust of impulse, I deviated. A colleague's anecdote about a quaint countryside inn, an idyll promising restorative quiet, had lodged itself in my mind. Rashly, I tossed a valise into the car, fed the coordinates into the machine, and surrendered to the asphalt ribbon unwinding before me. The initial passage unfurled pleasantly. Cityscape yielded to suburban sprawl, which in turn softened into undulating fields kissed by a lowering sun. Hues of incandescent orange and soft rose bled across the heavens, igniting a fragile spark of adventure within my usually cautious heart. That nascent thrill began to gutter as the roads devolved, narrowing, their surfaces cracked and neglected. The digital oracle insisted I remain true to the path, yet a sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, pricked at my confidence. Could this derelict artery truly lead to a sought-after retreat? When the device declared mission accomplished amidst this profound emptiness, the certainty of error struck like a physical blow. I attempted retreat, but dusk was swiftly thickening the air, rendering each tree-shrouded lane indistinguishable from the last. My phone, stripped of its signal miles back, offered neither solace nor solution. A chill tide of panic began its insidious creep as the car's vital signs faltered. The fuel gauge, a blinking crimson eye warning of imminent starvation. The last outpost of gasoline lay over an hour behind me, passed with the blithe assurance of proximity. Just as the grim prospect of a night spent cramped and cold in the driver's seat solidified, pinpricks of light materialized in the distance. Relief, potent and sudden, surged through me. Habitation. Drawing nearer, the lights resolved into a small township. A welcoming sign, ravaged by time and weather, stood sentinel, its inscription barely legible, Blackwood Hollow. The name stirred no recognition, but such concerns were trivial. A fuel pump, perhaps, a simple room for the night. These were the extent of my desires. I navigated the main thoroughfare at a crawl, absorbing the tableau. An unsettling dissonance hummed beneath the surface. The architecture was ancient, profoundly so, as if lifted wholesale from daguerreotypes. No modern facades, no familiar chain eateries, not even the blink of a traffic signal punctuated the gloom. And despite the lamps casting their weak glow, the streets remained utterly barren. I braked before what appeared to be a petrol station, its pumps standing like skeletal figures in the swirling mist. A faint chime echoed as I opened the car door, but no attendant emerged from the shadows. Rust scaled the flanks of the pumps. The place exhaled an air of protracted disuse. "Hello?" My voice, unnaturally amplified in the hush, seemed to dissipate without purchase. "Anyone here?" Silence answered. The door to the adjacent shop was firmly locked, its windows opaque with accumulated grime. A tremor traced my spine, unrelated to the evening's cool breath. Something here was deeply, fundamentally skewed. Retreating to the perceived safety of my vehicle, I thumbed the locks. Someone, anyone, had to exist in this place. Someone to orient me, to point the way back to the known world. I pressed onward, deeper into the town's core, gliding past shuttered emporiums and houses steeped in darkness. The entire setting felt curated, unnervingly pristine in its antiquity, yet utterly lifeless, like an elaborate stage awaiting actors who would never arrive. Then a beacon, a single illuminated window in a structure suggesting a modest diner. Hope, sharp and poignant, flared as I parked and hastened toward the entrance. A bell, tinny and frail, announced my arrival into a space immaculately preserved from the mid-20th century. Booths, upholstered in scarlet vinyl, gleamed alongside chrome-trimmed tables. The floor, a stark checkerboard of black and white. It was a scene plucked directly from a time capsule. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman, her uniform crisp, a diminutive paper cap perched on her silver hair. Her smile reached me across the room, yet an indefinable quality beneath its surface sent ripples of unease across my skin. "Welcome to Blackwood Hollow, son," she offered, her voice possessing the dry crackle of antique radio broadcasts. "You appear adrift." Hesitantly, I approached the counter. "I am, truth be told. My navigator led me rather spectacularly astray. I was hoping you might guide me back toward the highway." The woman's smile stretched, revealing an unsettling number of teeth. "Oh, we don't see many travelers passing through Blackwood Hollow. Why not take a seat? Have a slice of pie? We can unravel your predicament once you've rested your bones." Every nerve ending screamed for flight, yet the desperate need for information anchored me. I slid into a booth, observing her as she moved behind the counter with a quiet bustle, humming a melody devoid of tune. She placed before me a slice of cherry pie. It looked innocuous, perfect even, but its aroma was wrong. Cloyingly sweet, laced with an unidentifiable, faintly metallic undertone. "My apologies," I murmured, nudging the plate almost imperceptibly away. "I find I haven't the appetite. If you could merely indicate the highway's direction, I'll impose no further." The smile vanished from the woman's face, replaced by a rigid mask of displeasure. "Well now, that isn't courteous, is it? After I've gone to the effort and you spurn my pie." The bell above the door jingled again. Turning, I saw several figures entering the diner. Their movements were stiff, bordering on mechanical, their faces vacant, eyes strangely unfocused. They arranged themselves silently, forming an impassive barrier between me and the exit. Panic constricted my throat. "Look, I truly appreciate the gesture, but I must be leaving." I rose, but the woman's hand shot out with startling swiftness. her grip closing around my wrist with a strength that felt inorganic. Her skin possessed a cool, faintly waxy texture against mine. "I'm afraid departure isn't an option, son," she stated, her voice now utterly devoid of its earlier faint warmth. "You understand, fresh faces are a rarity in Blackwood Hollow, and we do so cherish fresh faces." The newcomers were inching closer, their locomotion jerky, unnatural. Under the diner's stark fluorescent glare, their complexions seemed to possess an odd synthetic sheen. Adrenaline surged, a primal command overriding reason. I wrenched my arm free and lunged for the door, shouldering past the encroaching figures. Cold, unyielding hands scrabbled at my clothes, but I tore loose. Reaching my car, keys fumbled in my trembling grasp as the diner door swung open behind me. The engine caught with a desperate roar. I slammed the accelerator, tires shrieking protest on the worn pavement. My rearview mirror framed a horrifying exodus. Figures spilling from doorways all along the street, converging, all moving with that same disjointed, marionette-like gait. They flooded the road behind me, arms outstretched, as if to physically tether my fleeing vehicle. I raced through the town, veering blindly at intersections, frantic for an escape route. Each street mirrored the last, every building a flawless simulacrum of a bygone era. It was akin to being trapped within a malevolent snow globe. Just as despair threatened to engulf me, I saw it. The dilapidated welcome sign, the threshold I'd crossed unknowingly hours before. Beyond it lay the tenebrous tree-lined track that had delivered me to this nightmare. I jammed the pedal to the floor, the car bucking violently as it hit the unpaved earth. Branches lashed the windscreen as I plunged into the forest's embrace, fleeing the impossible town and its chilling inhabitants. For what felt like an eternity, I drove, heart hammering against my ribs, flinching at every shifting shadow, perpetually convinced that the next bend would loop me inexorably back to Blackwood Hollow. Only when the familiar green and white of highway signage emerged from the gloom did I permit myself a ragged gasp of air. The charming B&B remained an unvisited dream. I drove straight home, my grip white-knuckled on the steering wheel throughout the long journey as the first pale fingers of dawn touched the sky upon my arrival in my own driveway. The tension finally broke, and I wept with raw, unadulterated relief. In the subsequent days, I sought answers. I pored over maps, trawled the digital ether, contacted regional historical societies. No record existed of a place named Blackwood Hollow. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of the night, doubt whispers. Could the ordeal have been merely a fugue state, induced by stress? A hyper-realistic nightmare born of fatigue? But then my gaze falls upon the silent navigation device, and I remember its confident, catastrophic guidance into that abyss. A chilling question surfaces. How many other lost souls has it steered toward Blackwood Hollow? And how many failed to find their way back? I rely on paper maps now, clinging to well-trodden paths, for I have learned that while not all who wander are lost, some coordinates on this earth are best left uncharted, and occasionally, the most terrifying destination is the one that exists solely beyond the edge of any known map. His gaze snagged mine across the water, sharp and sudden as a hook finding flesh. In that instant, the placid surface of my day fractured. It wasn't mere observation, it was assessment, the chilling calculus of a predator sizing up its mark. A look he wore like a second skin. This tranquil escape was over before it truly began. Survival was now the only quarry. Whisperwind Lake was meant to be an antidote, a balm drawn from mountain springs against the city's fever. Tucked deep in folds of ancient hills, miles from any echo of civilization, it promised oblivion among pines and ripples. Dawn found me there, the lake breathing mist like a slumbering giant. Pine-sharp air, laced with the scent of damp earth and decay, filled my lungs. I claimed a secluded cove, a small kingdom of stone and shore, far from the few other early risers rigging their lines. Solitude, mine. Hours dissolved into the lake's gentle rhythm, water sighing against pebbles, the percussive splash of a rising trout, wind whispering through high branches. Two silver-scaled beauties lay cooling in my creel. Contentment settled warm and easy, then peripherally, a dissonance. 50 yards down the shoreline, a figure stood sentinel, rod propped uselessly beside him, not angling, observing me. A rival angler, perhaps, gauging my luck? I tried the thought on, but it fit poorly. His stillness was unnatural, a taut focus aimed solely my way. A shiver traced my spine, cold despite the strengthening sun. I cast again, forcing my attention to the line slicing the water. But the awareness of him remained, a physical pressure. When my gaze flicked back, the distance had shrunk. 10 yards, maybe 15, vanished. Now details sharpened. A man etched by wind and time, 50s maybe, beard like tangled lichen on granite. But the eyes, flint gray chips, devoid of warmth, holding a stark, appraising hunger. Enough, the illusion of peace shattered. I reeled in, the lure suddenly heavy, pointless, time to relocate. As I gathered my meager kit, I tracked him sidelong. He mirrored my actions, dismantling his own setup with unsettling synchronicity. My pulse kicked, a frantic drum against my ribs. This strayed far from any recognizable lakeside etiquette. Instinct screamed retreat, yet foolishly, I pushed deeper along the shore, away from the gravel track leading to my vehicle. A fatal miscalculation, born of a desperate hope. Distance might dilute his intent. Another cove, superficially identical, yet tainted now by fear. My fingers fumbled with the bait, trembling, betraying the calm I tried to project onto the water's surface. Cast, reel, breathe, but the unseen gaze burned into my back. A slow turn confirmed it. He stood nearer still, perhaps 30 yards off, rod abandoned. All pretense dissolved. Just the unwavering stare, those predatory eyes locking onto mine. Looking for a good spot? My voice, thinner than intended, stretched across the water. Plenty of room further down. Silence answered. Utter, chilling silence. He didn't blink, didn't shift. The air thickened. Trouble wasn't coming. It was here. Gear forgotten, survival instinct overriding all else, I spun towards the forest path, the only artery back to the parking lot. A quick walk bled into a trot. Behind me, the deliberate crunch of boots on shale, no longer stealthy, now openly pursuing. The trail plunged into shadow, a claustrophobic tunnel through dense timber. My breath tore raggedly in my chest. Trees pressed close, skeletal branches snagging at my clothes like desperate hands. A root snagged my foot. I pitched forward, catching myself against rough bark. Then his voice, scraping the air, cold and rough-edged. Running won't help. Nowhere to run out here. Just the lake or the deep woods. And neither wants you. Reason fled. I bolted, plunging off-trail into the tangled heart of the woods. Direction dissolved into pure momentum. The singular goal of away. Briars tore at my skin, branches lashed my face, lungs screaming for air. Behind, his measured tread, the unnerving calm of a creature utterly at home in this terrain, confident in the inevitable outcome. He wasn't chasing. He was herding. Then a rupture in the green wall, a small sun-dappled clearing, and nestled within, like a rotten tooth in the landscape, a derelict cabin. Hope, sharp and irrational, surged. Sanctuary? A place to regroup. I sprinted for the sagging structure. The door groaned inward off ruined hinges at my shove, releasing a thick miasma of damp rot and forgotten time. One cramped room choked with shattered remnants of furniture. No windows, no other exit. A dead end. My desperate gamble had become a cage. Outside, slow, deliberate footfalls echoed on the decaying porch planks. My gaze swept the gloom, frantic for defense. Against the crumbling hearth leaned a length of rusted iron, a fireplace poker. I seized it, its pitted surface cold and rough against my sweating palm. "Come along out," the voice drifted through the warped doorframe, closer now, laced with a chilling pseudo-reasonableness. No need to make this messy. I flattened myself against the rough-hewn wall beside the entrance, poker held high, knuckles white. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic prisoner. Slowly, the door swung wider. Breath held captive in my throat. He stepped across the threshold, silhouette momentarily haloed before his eyes adjusted to the dim interior, a flicker of blindness. My only advantage. With a guttural cry fueled by terror, I swung the giant bar. It met his shoulder with a sickening thud. A bellow of startled agony erupted as he staggered back. I didn't pause, didn't look. I bolted, ducking under a flailing arm, back into the deceptive sunlight of the clearing. Freedom was a fleeting illusion. He recovered with shocking speed, lunging, tackling me from behind before I'd taken 3 strides towards the trees. We hit the earth hard, the impact driving the air from my lungs. He rolled me, his weight crushing, pinning me beneath him. Inches away now, those eyes were voids, pale, almost translucent blue, yet burning with a feral light. "Thought you'd slip away?" His breath, hot and foul, washed over my face. "Nobody slips away, not here. This is my place, my water, my trees. And you, just another stray stumbling into the snare." I thrashed uselessly, a frantic fish on a line. He was immovable. His hands, rough and strong, closed around my throat. Pressure mounted, darkness swarmed the edges of my vision, the world narrowing to a pinpoint of fading light. Then, from the deepest wellspring of instinct, something primal clawed its way free. Survival. Pure, unthinking, my right hand scrabbled blindly in the dirt and leaf litter. Fingers closed around stone, rough, heavy. Summoning a final surge of adrenaline, I slammed the rock against the side of his skull. A wet, cracking sound. His grip slackened instantly. He groaned, rolling sideways, momentarily dazed. I scrambled backward on all fours, gasping, dragging precious air into starved lungs. He was already stirring, shaking his head like a wounded bull. I turned and fled. This time, the flight was pure animal terror. Through tangled undergrowth, over decaying logs, splashing heedlessly through icy streams. No thought of direction, only distance. Time lost all meaning, then abruptly, the trees thinned, and I stumbled out onto the familiar stony shore of Whisperwind Lake. And there, impossibly, miraculously, the small gravel lot, my car. Keys trembled violently in my grasp, refusing the ignition. Finally, the engine caught. I slammed the gear shift, tires spitting stones, fishtailing onto the narrow track. In the rearview mirror, a fleeting image. A lone figure standing at the forest's edge, motionless, watching me go. Even across the growing distance, I felt the chilling weight of that unbroken stare. I drove until the mountains dissolved into the flat plains of the highway. Until Whisperwind Lake was a shrinking nightmare in my memory. Only within the concrete embrace of the city did the dam finally break, unleashing a storm of shuddering relief and terror. The authorities listened, dispatched patrols. They found the cabin, the signs of struggle in the clearing, but of the gaunt man with the predator's eyes? Nothing. Vanished like mist off the morning lake. A possible vagrant, they suggested gently. Perhaps an overactive imagination fueled by solitude, but their rationalizations offered no comfort. His eyes, his voice, they are etched onto the dark walls of my sleep. The woods, the water, places that once offered solace, now pulse with latent menace. Fishing rods gather dust, hiking boots remain unworn. That profound quiet I once craved now screams with his presence. For I know he remains, a patient shadow by his lake, in his woods. Waiting, watching. And the silence carries the terrifying knowledge that the wilderness holds predators far more cunning than fang and claw. Predators who wear familiar faces, waiting for the unwary to stray too far from the light. Disquietude, I've learned, can seep into the most familiar spaces. Even a seventh-floor apartment chosen for its modest rent and passable view of the asphalt ribbon below. This building, a relic with floors that sigh underfoot and paint that curls away from hallway corners like dried parchment, had never troubled me. The elevator's occasional shudder, the lobby light's nervous tick, these were mere quirks of age. I'd settled in months prior, finding a rhythm, until about a fortnight ago. It began on a Wednesday, deep into the evening, perhaps 10 o'clock. Cocooned on the sofa, in the unlit living room, I drifted before some flickering late-night broadcast. My window gazes upon a vacant lot across the street, a patch of urban emptiness offering little spectacle. Thus, the curtains remain drawn after dusk, a shield against imagined gazes from the adjacent building, separated by a sliver of air, true, but who knows what eyes, aided or unaided, might pry. Half submerged in drowsiness, I registered a stir in the heavy fabric. Illusion, I thought first. No breeze whispered, the windows were shut tight. The old wooden frame, admittedly imperfect, might permit a phantom draft, yet nothing substantial enough to coax such a definite ripple from the cloth. I silenced the television, listening. A faint thrumming began beneath my ribs. Unexplained phenomena unnerved me, though I'm not easily frightened. Leaning into the dimness, I watched. The curtain jittered again. A distinct nudge as if from a hidden hand. A concealed shoulder. Rising, I moved toward the window, my hand outstretched to grasp the drapery. Just before contact, a shadow bled through the material. Indistinct, yet undeniably there. Larger than a misplaced object, more substantial than a trick of light. It held the vague contours of a human form, nearly dissolving into the surrounding gloom. My throat went taut, the fine hairs on my nape prickling. Intruder! The thought ignited, then sputtered. 7th floor access points, the front door, securely bolted, and the bedroom's diminutive fire escape window, perpetually locked and far too constricted for silent ingress. My pulse hammered against my temples. I retreated a step, then lunged for the light switch near the sofa. Illumination flooded the room. I spun back. The curtain hung placidly, innocuously. Behind it, nothing. I swept it aside, peered out. Only the void of the street, the vacant sill. Rubbing my eyes, I scoured the living room, probing the corners cluttered with boxes and a dormant lamp. Emptiness answered. Back on the sofa, I wrestled my breathing back to steadiness. My phone confirmed mere minutes had elapsed since the first stir, though an age seemed to have passed within my constricted chest. Fatigue, I reasoned. Tired eyes play tricks. I extinguished the television and sought refuge in bed, attempting to banish the image. A peculiar, isolated incident. Yet sleep proved elusive. The silhouette persisted behind my eyelids, standing sentinel, observing through the thin veil of fabric. I tossed, turned, consulted the clock's impassive glow, forced my eyes shut. Morning arrived announced by the alarm, finding me hollowed out, as if I hadn't slept a wink. For several days, normalcy reigned. I returned from work, banished shadows with electric light, prepared solitary meals. Evenings unfolded with the television's glow, sometimes dimmed, sometimes bright. An unsettling calm prevailed. Then Sunday evening, returning from the market around 6, I entered the living room to find the curtain slightly ajar, pulled back just enough for someone to peek outside. A violation of habit. I always ensure they are fully drawn upon leaving, particularly on weekends. Disquiet coiled in my gut. Groceries deposited, I approached the window, scanned the street below. Parked cars, desultory pedestrians, the mundane tableau. My fingers brushed the curtain. It felt cool to the touch. Stomach tightening, I yanked it shut with unnecessary force, then performed a meticulous sweep of the apartment. Front door, locked. Bedroom, bathroom, undisturbed. Possessions untouched. Nothing else seemed amiss. I sought out Elias, the building's caretaker, a quiet man in his 50s whose duties involved sweeping corridors and monitoring arrivals. I explained my suspicion. Someone might have gained entry. He listened impassive, assuring me he'd observed no unfamiliar faces ascending. A faulty lock, perhaps. He shook his head, citing diligence with main doors, stairwells, the elevator cameras. No breaches, he insisted, murmuring something about the building's age before shuffling away. Paranoia began to take root in the following days. Departing for work involved a ritual. Lock the door, check the handle, check again before summoning the elevator. Returning meant an immediate anxious glance toward the living room window. Sometimes the curtain remained closed. Other times, a sliver of darkness beckoned from behind its edge. Not daily, but frequently enough to fray my nerves. I affixed a small piece of tape bridging the curtain's edge to the wall. 2 days later, I found it lying on the floorboards. Impossible. No draft possessed such deliberate strength. I approached Elias again. A sigh, the familiar refrain, nothing unusual noted, no unauthorized access past the lobby. I scrutinized the window frames myself. No scratches, no signs of tampering. Nothing. One night, I camped out in the living room, lights off, television muted, waiting. Stillness reigned, at least while consciousness held. But I awoke abruptly, near 2 in the morning, sensing, rather than seeing clearly in the dark, that the curtain was parted. A distinct gap. My heart leaped, a chill tracing patterns on my arms. I surged up, flicked on the lights, tore the curtain wide. Nothing. The street below slept. Was I sleepwalking, losing my grip on reality? These were not afflictions I'd ever known. A cheap webcam, perched on my desk and aimed at the window, became my silent sentinel. Reviewing the overnight footage yielded mostly darkness and my own restless movements before bed. Then fast-forwarding, around 3:15 a.m., a flicker. The curtain stirred, subtle yes, hampered by the camera's poor resolution, but the fabric undeniably shifted, pushed from behind by something shaped, disturbingly, like a hand. A single, deliberate motion, then stillness. My stomach plummeted. I replayed it, again and again. Not imagination, something. I presented the footage to Elias. A shrug. A draft perhaps. The building settling. These old windows, he offered. Air moves in strange ways. But the shape looked like a hand, I insisted. He stared blankly at the screen, then at me, promising only to keep a closer watch on the hallway cameras. Frustration gnawed. Moving, breaking the lease. Solutions beyond my current means. Explaining this to anyone, my boss included, felt like inviting ridicule. I resolved to handle it myself. I examined every inch of my apartment. Walls, floors, searching for hidden panels, forgotten access points. Nothing. I even pressed along the hallway walls outside my unit, seeking secret doors, anomalies. The building was old, yes, but structurally sound, seemingly straightforward. Meanwhile, the curtain continued its dance. Some nights, silence. Others, a flicker caught in peripheral vision while watching television. A swift turn of the head. Stillness. Once, returning from the kitchen for water, having left the living room dark, I found the curtain drawn back a full foot, as if someone had boldly craned their neck to survey the street. My heart hammered violently. My hands trembled. I seized the fabric, yanking it shut, mind racing, grasping for logic, finding none. An inexpensive motion sensor joined my arsenal, placed near the window. Testing confirmed its function. A sharp beep at movement. For several nights, it remained silent. Then, a Thursday, near midnight, drowsing in the bedroom, I heard it. A soft electronic chirp from the living room. Instantly awake, skin prickling, sweat beading on my back. I scrambled up, retrieved the baseball bat from the closet, and burst into the living room. The sensor's light glowed, but the room was empty. The curtain hung undisturbed. Bat raised, I scanned every shadow, every corner. Only my own ragged breathing and the refrigerator's low hum broke the silence. I reset the sensor. It beeped when I moved near it, fell silent when he stepped away. Functional. I stood by the window, gazing down. Distant lights glowed in the building opposite. No faces peered back. A car drifted past, its headlights momentarily illuminating the pavement. The microwave clock read 12:07 a.m. I fought back the image of the silhouette, the phantom hand, but my body remained rigid with tension long after. That weekend, seeking solidarity or answers, I knocked on neighbors' doors. Most residents kept to themselves. The woman in 704, weary-eyed, reported nothing strange, though she mentioned unreliable wiring potentially affecting the security cameras. Scant comfort. The man in 710, at the hall's end, shared trivia about the building's past life as a hotel, mentioning odd fixtures in some rooms, but dismissed my experiences. His gaze held a pitying skepticism. I retreated, feeling the isolation sharpen. Returning to my apartment, I found the curtain parted again, perhaps an inch. Mail slipped from my grasp as I stood, transfixed by that narrow gap. Chest tight, I strode over, pulled it closed. Then, the methodical, futile search. Under the bed, behind furniture, closets, the utility space. Nothing. A tension headache pulsed behind my eyes. I sank onto the couch, rubbing my temples, desperately seeking a rational explanation, finding only dead ends. My breathing grew shallow. I forced myself to inhale slowly, deeply. I decided to leave the curtain wide open, a defiant invitation. Let it move now. I began preparing dinner, glancing constantly toward the window. The fabric hung motionless, utterly inert. Later, attempting sleep, faint creaks emanated from the living room. Floorboards settling, common in old structures, yet tonight, sinister. My senses strained, hyper-alert. Lying rigid in bed, I stared at the bedroom door, its outline faintly visible in the sliver of streetlight filtering through the blinds. My heart thumped a heavy rhythm. After an hour of this torment, I surrendered. Rising, I illuminated the entire apartment, inspecting the window once more. The curtain remained exactly as I'd left it, wide open. A wave of foolishness washed over me. Then, just as I turned back toward the bedroom, a distinct brushing sound whispered against the fabric. I froze, spun around, stillness. I approached, peered outside. The street was deserted, the building opposite dark. My reflection stared back, weary and fraught. A sudden buzz from my phone, a spam text, made me flinch violently. Hands trembling, I extinguished the living room lights, retreated to the bedroom, locked the door. A flimsy gesture, left the bedside lamp burning, and willed myself toward oblivion. Saturday morning brought renewed resolve. I confronted Ilyas about changing the locks. Permitted, he said, but at my expense. I purchased a new lock set, installed it that afternoon. A marginal improvement in perceived security, though it failed to address the core mystery. The how. Given Elias's insistence that no duplicate keys existed, no unauthorized entries occurred. I fortified further. Fresh adhesive seals around the window edges. A small rubber wedge placed firmly at the base of the front door. That night, I slept under a thin blanket of hope. The next day, returning from a brief grocery run, I found the curtain parted again. Perhaps 2 inches. My throat constricted. The new lock gleamed, untouched. The wedge remained precisely positioned. I ran to the window, yanked the curtain closed, clutching the fabric in a white-knuckled fist. My heart felt lodged in my throat. Then, a distinct click sounded from the vicinity of the kitchen. I whirled, adrenaline surging. Silence descended again. I crept toward the kitchen, fists clenched, listening intently. Only the refrigerator's hum. Drawers, cupboards, under the sink, all undisturbed. No forced entry, no footprints, no broken glass, nothing. Back in the living room, I collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the window, a volatile mix of terror and rage churning within. I fantasized about tearing the curtain down, nailing boards across the glass, but knew it would solve nothing, merely blind me to the presence when it returned. So I endure, day by day, suspended in this disquiet. Each homecoming carries the same dread anticipation. Will the curtain be drawn back? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes a fleeting movement teases the edge of my vision, vanishing upon direct gaze. Elias offers only tired denials. Neighbors remain oblivious or disbelieving. I've locked, sealed, sensed, recorded, watched. I've found nothing tangible beyond a grainy image, a triggered sensor, and the persistent, unnerving movement of fabric. Now, entering my apartment, my eyes fix first on the window. Closure brings a shallow breath of relief. An opening, however slight, makes my stomach clench. What resides behind it, how it operates, remains terrifyingly opaque. I know only that something watches, unseen, untouchable, and I am powerless to stop it. I remain here, on the 7th floor of this time-worn building. And every time that curtain stirs, I freeze. I listen, I watch, and I wait. With a curt dip of the head to the groundsman, Silas, lingering near the skeletal remains of a wrought iron fence, I crossed the threshold. His greeting was brief, a mere murmur swallowed by the breeze before a gesture ushered me toward the immense, time-ravaged doors. Years of neglect had etched themselves onto the building's facade. My purpose within was purely technical. Assess the bones, the structural soundness, for owners dreaming of resurrected ballrooms and glittering events. A standard inspection, I'd surmised. 5 hours perhaps, navigating decay, charting fissures, scrutinizing weary beams. Then, release. But the foyer met me with an immediate palpable density. The air thick with the scent of decomposing textiles and subterranean damp pressed in. Outside, Silas cast one final, unreadable glance my way before turning aside, phone pressed to his ear. A soft thud echoed behind me. The heavy doors had swung shut, sealing the entrance. A constriction tightened my chest. A fleeting panic I consciously subdued, thumbing my heavy-duty flashlight to life. Its beam carved a cone through the gloom, probing the depths of the main artery, a hallway yawning into shadow. Floorboards groaned their ancient protest beneath my boots. Plaster dust rained softly from wounded walls. Dust lay like a shroud over every surface. It was a cavernous place. Corridors branching into unseen wings, remnants of an era when, I'd been told, laughter and music spilled from rooms draped in luxury, guests adorned in finery, gliding beneath constellations of crystal. Now those chandeliers were skeletal husks or absent entirely, leaving only tattered ghosts of fabric, derelict furniture, and that pervasive aroma of forgotten histories. Advancing toward a voluminous chamber on the right, my light snagged on irregularities adorning the walls. Not art, not mere decoration, I realized upon closer approach. Masks, scores of them, leering from the plaster. Each bore features warped and unsettling, mouths twisted into leers or silent screams, eye slits narrowed to malevolent squints. Some hinted at elaborate craftsmanship beneath the grime, yet all shared a disquieting aura, amplified by the dust and the encroaching darkness. An involuntary inhalation drew the stale air deep, my stomach clenching. Their arrangement felt deliberate yet chaotic, hung at skewed angles, some high, some low, a scattered constellation of faces. Several were marred, edges chipped, paint flaking like diseased skin. I swept the beam across them, a clinical detachment warring with rising unease, and scribbled in my log. Wall masks, possible original fixture, assess salvage potential. I moved onward, deliberately pushing their unsettling geometry from my thoughts. I stepped into what must have been the grand ballroom. The ceiling soared into darkness, exposing timber ribs near its apex. The air hung heavy, damp, amplifying the sound of my own measured breathing into a hollow echo. It was then I felt it. A prickling coldness crawling up the nape of my neck, not a draft. The air was utterly inert, stagnant. I froze, listening intently. Silence, a profound waiting silence that seemed to absorb sound itself. My pulse hammered a faster rhythm against my ribs. Just the oppressive atmosphere, I reasoned, the power of suggestion in such a desolate place. I pivoted, sweeping the flashlight's beam in a slow arc. There, on the far side, near the shattered maw of a window, rested something that made my throat seize. One of the masks from the corridor leaned against the leg of an overturned chair. Its expression was a contorted sneer. I was certain, absolutely certain, it hadn't been there moments before. Had I dislodged it somehow? Sent it tumbling unseen? No, I hadn't brushed the walls. Swallowing hard against a sudden dryness, I resolved to simply document it. Mask located on ballroom floor. Apparent detachment from hallway display. Then, compelled by a need for order, perhaps, I crossed the floor to retrieve it. The wood felt alien in my grasp. Cold, unexpectedly coarse. Its rectangular eye voids seemed to absorb the light. An intense aversion washed over me. Holding it felt like cupping a dead face that somehow retained the capacity to observe. Turning it away, I carried it to a nearby trestle table, placing it down with deliberate care. Move on, check the columns. I noted the telltale signs of rot near their bases, captured images with my phone, used the focused beam to trace hairline fractures in the plaster, tested the floors given multiple locations. Perhaps 30 minutes later, backtracking toward the foyer for my water bottle, I passed the mask-lined corridor again. Something felt discordant. My gaze swept the macabre gallery, snagging on a vacant hook. An absence. Where a mask had hung, there was now only scarred plaster. My muscles tensed. Rubbing the back of my neck, I fought for composure. Could it be the one I'd found? The one I'd placed on the table in the ballroom? Logically, yes. Yet, the explanation felt thin, unsatisfying. I drank deeply from my bottle, the water cool against my tight throat, and resolved to inspect the left wing. Silas had mentioned a smaller parlor, a storage space. I navigated a narrower passage, the walls closing in, the musty odor intensifying. Damp patches stained the floorboards, which flexed alarmingly underfoot. My flashlight beam wavered. I tapped the casing, muttering a curse as it steadied. The parlor emerged from the gloom, smaller, intimate, draped in fabrics that might once have been crimson, but now molded in shades of bruised brown. A cracked looking-glass leaned wearily against the far wall. Chairs lay stacked haphazardly. And there, on a low table, thick with dust, more masks. The same unsettling style. Jarring angles, peculiar apertures for eyes, distorted mouths. A brief glance was enough. I scribbled notes on the room's structural state and retreated. Time bled away. My phone displayed 6:17 p.m. Silas had intended to secure the premises by 7, but the scale of the place demanded more time. He'd relinquished a hefty set of keys with a shrug. "Lock the main doors tight when you're finished. I'll be back come morning." His departure left me utterly alone as dusk began to bleed through the grimy windows. The prospect of navigating this mausoleum after dark held little appeal, but the evaluation remained incomplete. By 8, the world outside was ink. The building possessed no functioning power. My flashlight was my sole tether to visibility. I stood within a secondary ballroom, meticulously recording pillar dimensions, estimating ceiling height, when the chill returned, sharper this time. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. Simultaneously, a soft, dragging sound whispered through the silence, like heavy cloth being pulled across the floorboards. I spun, beam cutting violently through the darkness. Nothing, only swirling dust motes caught in the light, dancing in the vast emptiness. My heart leaped, a frantic bird against my ribs. Wind through a broken pane, a forgotten tapestry shifted by my own passage. I scanned the floor, seeking a logical source, finding none. Enough. Unease had girdled into something closer to dread. Time to consolidate my notes, secure the building, leave. I began the trek back to the main hall, stepping with exaggerated care over buckled planks. My flashlight flickered ominously. A sharp tap. Darkness. Another curse followed by frantic slaps against the casing. Futile. My phone then. I retrieved it, activating its weaker, bluer light. A poor substitute, but light nonetheless. In the reduced illumination, every creak of the floor seemed amplified, echoing unnervingly in the profound quiet. Sweat beaded on my forehead. I wiped it away with the back of my hand, forcing myself forward. Entering the vast expanse of the main hall, my phone's beam caught something near the wall. Low down, that mask, the sneering one. It lay flat on the floor, directly in my path, facing upward. I halted, the light trembling slightly in my hand. Hours ago, I had placed it on a table in the ballroom. Distinctly. Now it lay here, positioned as if waiting. The air felt thin, my breathing shallow and rapid. I approached cautiously, crouching for a closer look. Dust coated its carved planes, the empty eye sockets seeming to fix on my position. A wave of visceral revulsion rolled through me. An inanimate object, yes, but its presence felt deliberate, malevolent. Reaching out, my fingers brushed its cold surface. My hand was visibly shaking. Logic screamed for purchase. It slid. The floor slopes, vibrations. But the explanations felt hollow, contrived. I stood, holding the object at arm's length. My gaze flickered to the wall, to the gallery of faces. Now, I counted not one, but 3 empty hooks. 3 gaps in the grotesque tableau. Had I missed the others earlier? I swept the phone light around the immediate area. No other masks lay scattered on the floor. A sudden, unsettling idea formed. Return it. Hang it back on its designated hook. Observe. I started back down the corridor. The mask held away from my body. Each footstep seemed unnaturally loud, echoing in the suffocating stillness. The air felt viscous, slowing my progress. Finally, I reached the display. Locating an empty hook, I carefully hung the sneering visage upon it. The moment my fingers released the wood, a violent shiver traced my spine. An unseen gaze prickled my skin. My breath hitched, sweat slicked my palms. Taking a step back, I held the phone light steady on the mask. It hung inert, a silent, twisted sentinel. Seconds ticked by, measured by the frantic pulse in my ears. Then, forcing movement, I turned toward the exit. The foyer beckoned just around the corner. Faint luminescence from distant street lamps filtered through the grimy transoms above the main doors, offering a sliver of hope. Relief washed over me, cool and immediate. Nearly 9 p.m. I moved swiftly, retrieving my backpack from where I'd left it. The caretaker's keys felt heavy in my pocket. For a moment, I clicked off the phone light, testing the ambient gloom. Shapes resolved slowly. Overturned chairs, the hulking form of a dust-laden reception desk. And then, a flicker of movement, peripheral, to my right. Phone light flared back on, stabbing into the shadows. Nothing. Just a narrow, decaying hallway, plaster peeling like sunburnt skin. A tremor ran through me. Clenching my jaw, I grasped the heavy door handle. It yielded slightly, then jammed fast. I rattled the handle, then inserted the key. The lock mechanism felt gritty, resistant. It turned with a reluctant click, but the door itself refused to open more than a hair's breadth. Blocked from outside, perhaps by debris. Frustration mounted. No time for this. Relocking it, I recalled Silas mentioning secondary exits. A small service door near the lavatories. I'd noted it earlier. I turned back into the oppressive darkness. Navigating the labyrinthine corridors again, I conserved the phone's dwindling battery, flicking the light on and off. My own breathing seemed unnaturally loud, my footsteps echoing like hammer blows. The musty, clawing scent intensified near the mask corridor. Against my will, my eyes scanned the walls. 1, 2, 3. I faltered. An empty hook stared back at me near the end of the row. The sneering mask, gone. Again, my lungs constricted. Cold sweat erupted on my brow. I stood frozen, straining to hear anything over the blood pounding in my ears. Exposed. Vulnerable. "It's just a building," I whispered, the words feeling utterly false. An old, empty building. My light swept the floor. My own footprints mingled with others. Indistinct smudges, strange dragging marks in the thick dust. My heart hammered against my ribs. Move, find the side door, get out. The corridor seemed endless. Finally, the alcove containing the restrooms appeared, the side door visible at its terminus. Heavy, dark wood, clearly less frequented. I hurried toward it, relief surging only to stop dead. Leaning against the wall, mere feet from the door, propped upright as if deliberately placed, the mask. Its empty gaze met mine across the shadowed space. My breath came in ragged gasps, my hands clammy. Ignoring it, fighting the urge to look back, I lunged for the door handle. It turned. The door opened an inch, two, then stopped, solid. Something heavy obstructed it from the outside. A fallen beam, accumulated detritus. I shoved with my shoulder, put my weight into it. It wouldn't yield. Kicking at the base proved equally futile. Stepping back, heart pounding a frantic tattoo. The stale air tasted like ash in my dry mouth. My shirt clung damply to my skin. A glance, involuntary, flicked back to the mask, motionless. Yet its presence felt like a physical weight, a silent accusation. My mind raced. Windows. Many were boarded, but some were merely broken. A possibility. I moved quickly, phone battery now flashing a critical 15%. I found a tall, promising window further down the hall. The latch, rusted solid, resisted my efforts. I threw my weight against it, grunting, until metal shrieked in protest, and it finally gave way, opening a narrow gap. Cool night air, freedom, tantalizingly close. But beyond the grimy glass, a heavy iron grate barred the way. Solid, immovable, without tools I didn't possess. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. My face felt flushed, my breathing ragged. Phone out, I tried Silas. No signal. Thick walls maybe. A text message failed to send. Nearly 9:30 p.m. Find another way. Push the main door harder. There had to be a way out. I spun, phone light slicing through the darkness behind me, and froze. On the floor, not 10 feet away, lying face up as if dropped just moments before. The mask. My legs turned to water. Nausea churned in my stomach. How? How had it gotten there without a sound? A silent scream built in my chest. Get away from it. I stumbled backward, colliding heavily with the wall, phone nearly slipping from my grasp. Steadying myself, forcing my legs to move, I skirted wide around the obscene object, refusing to touch it, refusing to look directly at it. Out. Just get out. Back in the foyer, the main doors remained defiant. I threw my shoulder against them again, grunting with effort. They yielded that same frustrating inch. No more. Trapped, the word echoed in the cavernous space. My chest ached with the force of my heartbeat. My body vibrated with tension. Break a window. Near the entrance, smaller panes. A heavy oak chair sat slumped in a corner. Lifting it felt like hoisting lead, my arms trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. I swung it, aiming for the nearest pane. Glass cracked, starred, but held. My own exertion echoed back at me. Again. Spiderweb fractures spread, shards tinkled to the floor. Reinforcing wire mesh, embedded within the glass, held fast. 3 more swings, 4, fueled by desperation. A jagged hole, barely the size of my head, gaped in the pane. Not enough. The frame itself was bolted deep into the masonry. Panting, sweat stinging in my eyes, I lowered the chair. My arms burned, my heart felt bruised. Silence descended again, thick and watchful. I felt observed. Phone battery, 10%. I paced the foyer, a caged animal, light sweeping walls, ceiling, floor, dust motes danced, oblivious. Silas wasn't returning. Wait for morning, find a defensible spot, or break through. The thought of the mask, its relentless reappearance, spurred me on. The window. If I could weaken the frame. I hefted the chair once more, aiming for the edges of the broken pane, smashing with raw strength. More glass showered down, wires tore, groaned. I ignored the sharp sting, as a shard grazed my hand. My breathing rasped in my throat. Kicking at the base of the frame, I felt something give. Screws pulling loose from plaster. The hole widened marginally. A sound behind me. Wood scraping softly against wood. Every muscle locked. I spun, phone light carving through the gloom. A dark shape huddled near the hulking reception desk. Lowering the beam, my breath caught. The mask, lying there. It hadn't been there seconds ago. Cold dread washed over me, prickling my scalp. My hand shook, holding the light steady. I stood paralyzed, listening to the frantic thrumming in my ears. Logic abandoned me. Escape now, whatever it took. Grabbing the chair, I attacked the window frame with renewed ferocity. Glass flew, wires snapped, I hammered, kicked, pulled, ignoring the pain. Finally, with a screech of tortured metal, the frame buckled, tearing halfway from the wall. A gap, narrow, jagged, but passable. Outside, the blessed normalcy of the sidewalk beckoned. Relief surged fierce and intoxicating, turning for my backpack, just a reflex. My light swept across the reception desk. The masks sat upright beside it, facing the broken window, facing me. A spike of pure primal fear lanced through me. Backpack forgotten, I scrambled, twisted, forced my body through the opening. Shards of glass tore at my jacket. Then I was falling, stumbling onto the cool concrete. The night air a shock against my overheated skin. My hands trembled, small cuts stinging on my arms. But I was out. I scrambled to my feet, staring back at the dark, looming edifice. Silent, still. Through the jagged hole I'd created, I thought I could just discern the faint outline of the mask still sitting by the desk. Patient waiting sentinel. I couldn't be sure. Didn't want to be. I turned and ran, footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalk, not stopping until I reached the sanctuary of my car. Doors locked, engine roaring to life, my heart still hammered against my ribs. One last glance in the rearview mirror. The building stood inert, lightless, but the feeling lingered, cold and heavy. Gripping the steering wheel, drawing shuddering breaths, I pulled away from the curb, accelerating into the night. I didn't look back again. Filing the report could wait. Distance. That's what I needed. Distance from that decaying hall and from the vacant, watching eyes of those damnable masks. The summons arrived perhaps a month past, delivered via a solicitor's dry pronouncement. My great-uncle Theron, a figure hovering dimly at the edge of memory, had bequeathed to me his collection of antiquarian volumes. An unforeseen inheritance, certainly, yet curiosity forbade refusal. 2 weeks hence found me navigating the shadowed threshold of his decaying residence, appending my signature to stiff documents before wrestling a formidable oak etagere laden with dust-furred tomes into my possession. Initially, they received scant attention, relegated to a corner of my living space, awaiting a moment of greater resolve for proper inspection. Then, one volume detached itself from the collective obscurity, distinguished by its peculiar integument. The cover possessed an unnerving smoothness, and riffling its leaves produced a susurrus, delicate as a half-forgotten tune. A faint vibration, electric and cool, sparked against my fingertips at each contact. Imagination, I reasoned, yet my gaze, my thoughts, returned insistently to this singular book, while its companions gathered dust unheeded. Thus commenced the affair. Once wrestled into my modest dwelling, a place of stark furnishings and uncluttered geometries where I resided alone, the étagère found its station against my study wall. Silence reigned elsewhere. The study itself is austere. A simple timber desk, a wheeled chair, a solitary lamp. Ornamentation finds no purchase here. Clarity and unobstructed views are my preference. That evening, the exceptional volume lay upon the desk's surface. Leaning back, I eased it open. The pages aged to the cusp of fragility, yet yielded pliantly. And with their turning came that soft resonance, reminiscent of a distant music box, yet devoid of shrillness, initially quite calming. Faded Latin graced the title page. Though much remained indecipherable, fragments surfaced. Tempestas perhaps, and Porta. Deeper I ventured, and the melody swelled almost imperceptibly. Still gentle, provoking no alarm. My finger traced the lines of script, a futile grasp at meaning. Little yielded, but a peculiar constriction arose within my chest. Not pain, but an insistence, as if my very lungs demanded a deeper draught of air. Setting the volume aside, I sought repose. Sleep came untroubled that first night. The second night reclaimed its predecessor's tableau. The study steeped in gloom save for the lamp's isolated glow, the house utterly still. Before me rested the closed codex. Upon opening it, the cadence resumed, slow, elemental, snaring my attention until I hummed its rhythm unawares. Then I perceived it, the subtle autonomy of the pages, shifting as if guided by an unseen current when my hand withdrew, settling always upon specific passages. A tilt of my head, a minute jolt like static discharge at my fingertips. More pages turned. The melody altered its pitch. A sudden dryness seized my throat. Swallowing, I resolved to read further, stumbling over the unfamiliar Latin, attempting pronunciation. With each uttered phrase, the music surged momentarily before receding to its low thrum when silence returned. My heart began a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Beads of perspiration bloomed on my brow, though the room remained cool, kissed by a night breeze through the open window. Attention coiled within me. My chest seemed to vibrate sympathetically. Abruptly, I closed the book, rose, and retreated. Water was needed. I drank it standing in the kitchen, gaze fixed on the blank wall, striving to regulate my breathing. Nothing else felt amiss, yet an unease lingered, the phantom sensation of observation. Solitude offers poor defense against such notions. Dismissing it as nerves, I went to bed. By the third night, the melody possessed a newfound insistence. It greeted me the moment I breached the study doorway, emanating faintly from the closed volume upon the desk, like a radio left whispering in an empty room. My stomach clenched. Approaching the desk, I extended a hand, touching the covers amplified the sound for a sharp instant. My pulse hammered, audible in my ears, while a glacial tremor traced my arms. I opened the book, the pages flickered, a ripple disturbing their edges. An optical illusion I couldn't dispel by rubbing my eyes. I pressed onward, flipping through leaves dense with archaic Latin, impenetrable words surrounding recurrent lines. Tentatively, I sounded them out. Aperi Januum, I whispered, my voice unsteady. The melody transmuted into a sustained, resonant hum that seemed to eddy around my head. Then pressure, distinct, gentle, like fingertips upon my shoulder. I spun, finding only empty air. Yet the sensation persisted, a crawl of awareness on my skin. I slammed the cover shut, dragging a hand across my face, finding it damp. My mouth was parched again. Forcing stillness upon trembling knees, I eventually seized the volume and consigned it to a desk drawer. Extinguishing the light, I quit the room. Sleep that night was a shallow, troubled thing. In the subsequent days, the book asserted its mobility. Left secured within the drawer, it would reappear upon the desk. Shelved amongst its peers, it would be discovered the following morning, lying open, invariably displaying the same Latin inscription. That recurring phrase, aperi januam. A quick search on my phone confirmed the translation. Open the door. I fought against it, immersing myself in routine, work, provisions, household chores. Yet each evening upon returning, the faint melody permeated the threshold. Arbitrary moments brought the chest pressure, the tingling in my limbs. At night, indistinct whispers sometimes slithered from the hallway, words lost in the passage. A chill pervaded the house, defying the mild weather outside. I took to wearing a jacket indoors, to little effect. My breath hitched near the study. Headaches became frequent companions. Thoughts of sedatives, of physicians, flickered, but I clung to the explanation of stress. Night 5 found me entrenched in the living room, television blaring, lights ablaze. A conscious effort to barricade against the study's influence. Remote clutched tight, I sought oblivion in the flickering screen. Near midnight, the image stuttered. Channel changes yielded only persistent interference. Then subtly, behind me, rising from the hallway, the melody. Every muscle seized. Setting down the remote, I rose on legs turned leaden. Drawn by the humming current, I moved towards the study. The door stood ajar, though I distinctly recalled securing it. Pushing it wider, revealed the book, centered on the desk, open. Its pages fluttering as if turned by an invisible hand. A distinct rustling accompanied the movement. Though no fan stirred, no window admitted a draft. Stepping closer intensified the melody. The familiar pressure settled on my shoulder, a guiding insistence. My heart's frantic beat echoed in my temples. Leaning down, I saw the text, the Latin phrase rendered bold, unavoidable. I sank into the chair, a dull ache registering in my lower back. The seat felt unnaturally cold. I attempted the passage again, striving for clarity. Aperi januam, ab ante ignotum. The rest dissolved into fumbled sounds, yet I persisted, hands shaking, the melody swelled, wrapping around me, and the chilling certainty of breath upon the nape of my neck sent prickles across my scalp. I stopped, scanned the dim room, shadows stark and deep under the lamplight. A faint creak emanated from the corner near the etagere. My eyes felt dry, gritty, blinking. I lifted the book. The pages vibrated beneath my thumbs. Rising, I tried to leave, but the melody trailed me, echoing down the hall. Reaching my bedroom, I closed the door, the sound now muffled but present. I placed the book on the nightstand, an act devoid of conscious reasoning, and sat on the bed, staring at its cover, breathing shallowly, hands numb. Sleep was a fragmented ordeal that night. Each descent towards unconsciousness was shattered by phantom pressures on my limbs, subtle tugs at the bedsheet, jolting me awake, convinced of an intruder. Morning revealed the book open on the mattress beside me. an act I had no memory of performing. With revulsion, I thrust it into the closet, slamming the door shut. The following days were spent in deliberate avoidance of the study. The book remained closeted, yet the melody surfaced unpredictably. During my shower, as I prepared to leave for work. Never loud, always a peripheral humming insinuating itself into my hearing, my appetite waned. A perpetual heaviness settled behind my eyes. I began scouring the house, searching for hidden speakers, some rational device. Nothing. All appeared ordinary, yet the conviction grew. Something within that volume desired my continued engagement. On the 8th night, the compulsion became undeniable. My hands trembled, my skin felt frigid. The air in the house grew thick, stagnant, saturated with the scent of decaying paper. A phantom library's breath. Drawn to the closet, I pulled open the door. The book lay on the floor, displaced from its previous position. Bending, I retrieved it. The cover felt strangely warm beneath my fingers. Instantly, the melody commenced. I carried it to the living room couch. Opening it revealed more Latin, but subtly altered, as if the letters themselves had shifted. I sounded out the words. The melody intensified. My lungs tightened painfully. My eyes watered. A rigidity locked my neck with each recited line. A bizarre vibration resonated in my jaw, my teeth chattering faintly. The words felt harsh, guttural, yet I pressed on. The pages seemed to acquire a luminescence under the overhead light, their corners shimmering faintly. Sweat plastered my shirt to my back, my heart a frantic drum. Leaning closer, I traced the sentences, forcing my voice towards steadiness. My lips felt cracked, my tongue thick, numbness crept up my calves, anchoring my ankles. Then, a rustle directly behind me. I whipped my head around. Only the end table lamp, the blank wall. Yet, distinctly, I felt the couch cushion beside me depress. As if under weight, I sprang up gasping. The book tumbled from my lap to the floor. The melody surged, a crescendo accompanied by a blast of frigid air that swept the room, whipping my hair across my face. Shielding my eyes, I waited. When I looked again, stillness had returned. The melody had subsided to its low, pulsing hum. My heart hammered violently. My mouth hung open. Reaching down, I retrieved the book. It had landed face down, miraculously undamaged. I placed it back on the couch. The humming seemed to throb in the air. My ears rang. Dizziness washed over me. Forcing motion into my limbs, I carried the book back to the study, intent on securing it beyond reach. I placed it within a desk drawer and turned the key in the lock. My pulse still raced. Sweat beaded on my upper lip. My eyes darted nervously around the familiar, yet suddenly alien, space. Backing out, I closed the door, leaving the lamp burning within. That night offered no respite. The melody seeped through the walls, punctuated now by a distinct scratching sound near the study door. I paced the hallway, fingers raking through my hair, wiping my brow. My body remained coiled, primed for flight. Calm down, I chanted internally. I turned on every light, checked every window latch. A call to a friend met only voicemail, amplifying the isolation. The scratching intensified, grating on my nerves until I could bear it no longer. Marching back into the study, I wrenched at the locked drawer. The mechanism gave way with the snap. The book lay open, pages turning languidly of their own accord. I lunged to slam it shut. The melody pierced my skull, sharp, agonizing. My ears buzzed, my eyes streamed, but I forced the cover down. A crushing weight descended on my chest, stealing my breath. I stared at the drawer. The lock's hasp was sheared clean off. How? My entire frame shuddered uncontrollably. Spotting a roll of duct tape in a nearby toolbox, I seized it. Frantically, I wrapped tape around and around the book, binding it shut, layer upon layer. Then I shoved the mummified volume back into the drawer and sealed the drawer itself with more tape. My heart pounded. Breath came in ragged gasps. I remained there a long while, crouched by the desk, the silence of the house broken only by the frantic rush of blood in my ears. My palms, slick against my jeans, eventually steadied. Rising, I left the study. Exhaustion, profound and bone deep, overwhelmed me. I collapsed onto my bed, fully clothed, staring sightlessly at the ceiling. The house was quiet then, but I knew, with chilling certainty, the silence was merely a pause. And so it rests. A faint thrum still vibrates in the atmosphere. Sleep remains elusive, though the melody has held its peace for the past hour. It could resume at any moment. What the book demands, what awaits should I yield further, remains unknown, a threshold I dread crossing. For now I sit, tracking the gradual slowing of my pulse, my gaze fixed upon the study door. If the music begins again, I will resist. How long that resistance can endure is a question I dare not answer. The wipers slapped a frantic, uneven rhythm against the deluge. Sheets of water blurring the world beyond the windshield into abstract streaks of grey and black. Elias strained his eyes against the downpour, navigating the slick ribbon of asphalt that unspooled through miles of desolate country. Then a shape materialized from the tempest. A figure, solitary and staggering along the road's drenched shoulder, garments plastered to their form like sodden bandages. He eased his foot off the accelerator, the car gliding slower, a knot tightening low in his gut. Prudence hissed warnings, urging him onward. Yet the image of that lone soul abandoned to the storm clawed at some buried instinct. He angled the car onto the verge, hazard lights pulsing the feeble orange SOS into the oppressive gloom. The window descended with a soft electric whir, admitting a spray of cold rain and the roar of the downpour. She approached, hesitant, a veil of dripping hair obscuring her features. "Everything all right?" Elias projected his voice over the storm's percussion. "Need a lift somewhere?" She lifted her head. A tremor, unrelated to the chill air, traced its way down his spine. Her eyes held a raw, hunted quality, wide and desperate. Across one cheekbone, a dark smear glistened. Mud, he hoped fervently. Just mud. "Please." The word was barely a sigh, lost almost instantly to the rain. "Help me." Against the shrill protest of his better judgment, the locks clicked open. She slid into the passenger seat, bringing with her the clean scent of soaked earth and something else. A faint, sharp tang, coppery and unsettling, that pricked at his senses. "Thank you," she exhaled, pushing the sodden curtain of air from her face. In the car's dim interior illumination, he saw she was young, early 20s perhaps, a delicate structure lay beneath the crime and exhaustion, beauty marred by whatever ordeal had cast her out into this night. I wasn't sure anyone would stop. "Where are you trying to get to?" Elias asked, aiming for nonchalance as he merged back onto the highway's dark, wet expanse. A fractional pause, just long enough to register. "The next town. Oak Haven. You know it." He gave a curt nod. 30 miles or so further on. A nondescript waypoint, familiar only from the periphery on countless sales trips. "I'm Elias," he offered, the silence feeling suddenly heavy, demanding the formality of names between strangers sharing this precarious space. "Clara," she supplied, but her inflection held a subtle dissonance, a faint question mark hanging after the name. They traveled wrapped in the sounds of the storm and the rhythmic sweep of the wipers. Silence stretched, punctuated only by the drumming tattoo of rain on the roof. Elias found his gaze drifting towards her periodically, trying to assemble the puzzle she presented. Her clothes, though drenched and fouled, hinted at quality, expense. The way she held herself, coiled tight like a spring, radiating a tense vigilance. It scraped along his nerves. "So," he ventured, the quiet becoming unbearable, "what has you out walking on a night like this?" Clara flinched, a barely perceptible recoil, as if the words themselves were blows. My car gave out," she stammered, her gaze fixed somewhere on the dashboard. "A few miles back." Plausible, certainly. Yet a hollow note echoed beneath the explanation. He opened his mouth, another question forming, but she preempted him. "Look, I'm grateful for the ride, truly. But I'd rather just not talk, if it's all right. It's been a trying night." He nodded, returning his focus fully to the treacherous road, though his thoughts churned. Who was this woman? And what shadow pursued her? For it was undeniably clear now. She wasn't just stranded. She was fleeing. 15 minutes bled into the relentless rain. Then, a flicker in the rearview mirror resolved into strobing blue and red lights, closing fast. A police cruiser. "Damn," Elias muttered under his breath. "Must have been pushing it a bit. Don't worry, I'll just pull over. Explain." But Clara wasn't listening. She'd gone utterly rigid beside him, her eyes stark with terror, locked onto the approaching vehicle. "No," she breathed, a desperate whisper. No, please don't let them take me." An icy current sluiced through Elias's veins. "What are you talking about, Clara? What is this?" She swiveled towards him, her gaze frantic, pleading. "I'll tell you everything, I swear it. Just please don't stop. If they catch me, they'll kill me." He hesitated, his foot hovering, suspended between the accelerator and the brake. Every synapse dedicated to self-preservation screamed, "Stop. Let the authorities sort out this mess." But sheer, unadulterated fear radiating from Clara, the desperate conviction in her eyes, it tipped the scales. He slammed his foot down. The engine howled in protest as the car surged forward, fishtailing slightly on the slick surface. Behind them, a siren erupted, a piercing wail that cut through the storm's roar. More lights joined the chase in his mirror. Christ Almighty! Elias swore, his knuckles white where they gripped the steering wheel. What in God's name have you dragged me into? Clara's hands were a blur of motion, fumbling inside her jacket. She withdrew a small cloth-wrapped object, pressing it urgently into his hand. "Take this," she commanded, her voice tight with adrenaline. "Hide it somewhere. They cannot find this." Instinctively, he took the dense little package, stuffing it deep into the pocket of his own jacket. "What is it? Drugs?" She shook her head vehemently. "Evidence. Proof. What they've been doing. The corruption, the killings. It's all there. Corruption. Killings." His mind struggled to grasp the implications. The car skittered violently as they navigated a sharp curve, Elias wrestling it back under control. The sirens clawed at their heels, relentless, nerve-shredding. There, Clara leaned forward, peering intently through the rain-lashed windshield. A turnoff. See it? Old logging trail. If we can make that, we might shake them. He saw it. A barely discernible cleft in the wall of trees lining the highway. Taking it at this velocity felt suicidal. Yet, the alternative, capture by the pursuers, who Clara claimed meant to kill her, felt infinitely worse. A split-second calculus of risk. He wrenched the steering wheel hard right. Tires screamed, losing purchase. For one heart-stopping, vertiginous moment, the world tilted, threatening to invert before they lurched violently onto the unpaved track. The forest canopy swallowed them whole, dense branches screeching against the car's metal skin. Elias killed the headlights, plunging them into a disorienting, near-absolute darkness. Driving blind felt like madness, but the sirens, though receding, still echoed faintly behind them. The rough track bucked and twisted, leading them deeper into the wilderness. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, when the only sound was the forest dripping around them, he guided the car into a small sheltered clearing and cut the engine. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by their own ragged breaths and the soft patter of rain finding its way through the leaves overhead. Clara turned to him, her face a pale oval in the gloom. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice fracturing. "I never wanted to involve anyone else." "Start talking," Elias said, surprised at the steadiness of his own voice. "Who are you? Really? And what the hell is actually going on?" She drew a long, shuddering breath, visibly composing herself. "My name isn't Clara. It's Detective Lena Petrova. I've spent the last year undercover, inside the Oak Haven PD." The narrative that unfolded over the next half hour felt ripped from the pages of some dark, gritty thriller. Systemic corruption within a small-town police department. Drug trafficking, extortion, bribery, escalating to murder, to silence witnesses, and protect their operation. Lena had been embedded, gathering irrefutable proof. But her cover had been compromised hours ago. They came to my safe house, she recounted, her eyes shadowed with the memory. It was close. I got out with the evidence drive, but nothing else. No phone, no weapon, no credentials. When your headlights appeared, I thought you might be one of them, sent to finish the job. Elias leaned back against the headrest, the sheer weight of her story pressing down on him. A part of his mind desperately sought refuge in disbelief, wanting it all to be an elaborate fabrication, but the raw fear he'd witnessed, the unwavering conviction in Lena's voice as she detailed the conspiracy. It resonated with a chilling authenticity. "So, what's the play now?" he asked, dragging a hand through his damp hair. "We can't just stay out here." Lena nodded, her expression grimly determined. "I have one contact I trust in the State Investigation Bureau. If we can reach him, show him this drive, he can mobilize resources. But it's dangerous. They'll have eyes on the main roads, alerts out. And I don't know how deep this rot goes. Who else might be on their payroll?" He felt the weight of the cloth bundle in his pocket, a tangible link to the life he'd inadvertently left behind the moment he'd chosen flight over surrender. There was no rewinding the tape, no stepping back onto the safe, predictable path. He was submerged in this, sink or swim. "All right," Elias heard himself say, turning the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling back to life. "Let's do it." As they eased out of the clearing, nosing the car back towards the uncertain promise of pavement and civilization, Elias felt the ground shift beneath his reality. What began as a mundane business trip had detonated into a desperate flight through a storm, entangled in a conspiracy far darker and more complex than he could have conceived. He glanced at Lena beside him, her profile etched with resolve against the faint pre-dawn light filtering through the trees. He had made his choice. Whatever horrors the coming hours or days held, whatever dangers lay coiled in wait down the road, they would meet them together. The night was bleeding into dawn, but their story felt as if it were just beginning. 3 years I'd call this building home. 3 unremarkable years, until the previous autumn bled into winter, and the ordinariness began to fray. It started subtly, a dissonance tied to the apartment down the hall, Unit 7B, officially occupied, leased to someone unseen, yet perpetually silent, or rather, silent by day. Nights were different. Nights brought acoustics that didn't belong. The ponderous tread of heavy feet on bare floors, a laborious dragging sound, dull thuds against shared walls, and strangest of all, muffled groans that seemed to seep into the corridor's stale air. Denial was easier, a shield against the unsettling creep of the irrational, but the sounds persisted, burrowing under my skin. I recall the specific evening it coalesced from background static into sharp focus. Returning late, the clock hands nearing 11, I heard it near the elevators. A grating scrape. Furniture being moved? My first thought, quickly discarded. Far too late for such mundane labor, and the sound, it wasn't wood on wood. It possessed a metallic resonance, the grim music of chains pulled across concrete. The elevator doors sighed open onto my floor. I stepped out, hesitated, listened. My own pulse throbbed, a frantic drum against the silence. A dryness seized my throat. The overhead fluorescent light, prone to fits, flickered erratically, each stutter amplifying the tension coiling in my gut. My own apartment door beckoned, mere steps away, but the dragging sound held me captive. It swelled briefly, then receded, a phantom tide. Curiosity, or perhaps a nascent dread, propelled me down the hallway towards 7B. The air grew still, the light dimmer here. Pressing my ear to the cold wood of the door, yielded only a faint, low scraping, a whisper of friction from within. My hands began an uncontrollable tremor. I pressed the bell. Silence answered. Initially, I kept this burgeoning unease to myself. Voicing it felt like inviting ridicule, accusations of paranoia. So, I tried to bury it beneath the routine of days. It resurfaced mere nights later. Midnight found me adrift in the blue glow of the television, flipping channels aimlessly, when the dragging sound returned, insistent. It felt closer this time, somehow intimate, as if just beyond my own living room wall. Then came a flat, dull thump. My stomach clenched. I muted the television, the remote suddenly heavy in my hand, and held my breath, straining to hear. The thumping repeated, followed by a low guttural moan, undeniably human, yet distorted, stretched thin and raw. Ghosts? Spirits? Such words felt clumsy, theatrical. I clung to logic. Perhaps someone for Kumad was inside? A tenant with nocturnal habits, an eccentric schedule. But the groans, they lacked the cadence of ordinary suffering. They felt ancient, dredged from somewhere deep and airless. Compelled, I rose and moved to my own door, easing it open just enough to peer into the hallway. Empty. The standard lighting cast long shadows, the silence profound, almost tactile. Yet, beneath it, I detected it again. The faintest whisper of scraping, like a chain being meticulously drawn across the floorboards within 7B. I crept closer, drawn by a morbid magnetism, until I stood directly before the neighboring door. A distinct chill permeated the space around it. Not a draft, but a localized coldness, unnatural. My fingers brushed the doorknob. The metal felt icy, locked, firmly. Should I knock? The thought barely formed before a sudden violent thump erupted from inside. I recoiled, stumbling, my heart leaping against my ribs. A strangled sound escaped me, something like, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Only silence responded. I jabbed the bell again. Waited, 20 seconds stretched into an eternity of nothing. Then I fled back to the perceived safety of my own four walls. Sleep became a shallow, troubled thing that night, haunted by the echo of dragging metal. A pervasive wrongness seemed to have seeped through the walls, contaminating my own space. The following morning, a chance encounter with Mr. Henderson, the building superintendent, in the lobby offered an opportunity. "Morning," I began, affecting casualness. "Just curious, who's in Unit 7B these days?" He blinked, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "That's Mr. Thorne's place," he replied smoothly. "Keeps to himself." I nodded, pushing slightly. "Any issues? Noise complaints? Anything like that?" Henderson shook his head. "Never heard a peep. Pays his rent on time." Then, abruptly, he pivoted the conversation to upcoming pipe maintenance. I let it drop, sensing a boundary. Roughly a week dissolved into the next. I returned one evening, laden with groceries, the bags biting into my palms. Stepping off the elevator, The hallway seemed dimmer than usual, thick with a peculiar odor, stale, earthy, like disturbed soil or damp concrete after rain. A quick scan revealed no spills, no obvious source. My apartment sits adjacent to 7B, separated only by a fire door recessed in the wall. As I passed the threshold of the mystery unit, a distinct creak sounded from within, followed immediately by a long, low moan that raised the hairs on my scalp. I froze mid-stride. The door to 7B wasn't fully closed. It hung slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of profound darkness. My mind snagged. Primal instinct screamed retreat, yet a perverse compulsion urged me forward. Using my foot, I nudged the door wider. The hinges groaned in protest. Inside, nothing. An empty living room, stark and barren under a coat of dust. No furniture, no boxes, no sign of life. The musty smell intensified, the scent of stagnant air trapped for ages. My grocery bag suddenly felt immense, anchors dragging me down while sweat slicked my palms. Hello? My voice was a thin reed in the oppressive silence. No reply. I venture a few steps inside, the floorboards complaining beneath my weight. To the left, a small kitchen alcove, equally desolate. No appliances, no counters, just vacant space. Ahead, bedroom doors stood open, framing views of more bare rooms. No curtains, no fixtures, nothing. I'd expected something. A misplaced sock, a stack of mail, a forgotten lamp. Anything to signify tenancy. There was only emptiness. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. The air held a clammy chill. A disquieting sense settled over me. The feeling of being observed from just beyond my line of sight, though only vacant walls met my gaze. Another tentative step. Then, from one of the shadowed back rooms, a faint thud. Soft yet undeniably close. I stopped breathing. Is someone there? The question echoed, swallowed by the void. No answer came. I retreated step by careful step until I reached the doorway, slipping back into the relative normality of the hallway. The door swung gently closed behind me, the latch clicking with quiet finality. My knees trembled. I scrambled the remaining distance to my own apartment, fumbling with the lock, securing myself inside. After that night, the unsettling morphed into something more personal. A persistent feeling began to shadow me in the hallway, late at night especially. A palpable presence just behind my shoulder. The barest whisper of movement, like displaced air or the soft brush of fabric against my neck. My ears strained, picking up phantom scraping footfalls that vanished when I risked a backward glance at the empty corridor. My heart would race, adrenaline flooding my system. Each return became a sprint to my door, a frantic wrestle with the keys, a slammed lock followed by minutes spent pressed against the wood, chest heaving, gulping air like a drowning swimmer, convinced I'd narrowly evaded something unseen. One particularly tense night, desperate for validation, for proof that my sanity wasn't fraying, I decided to document it. Phone in hand, I ventured back into the hallway, positioning myself near 7B. I activated the recorder, murmuring the date, time, my purpose, investigating the persistent noises. The corridor hummed with its usual low-level buzz, the ceiling lights casting a sterile glow. Silence stretched. I began to feel foolish, exposed. Just as I considered abandoning the effort, it happened. 3 distinct knocks, slow, deliberate, heavy, resonated from inside. 7B, striking the other side of the very door I stood before. My mouth turned to dust. I stared at the wood, phone trembling in my grip, still recording. "Hello?" I whispered, the sound barely audible. A faint, slithering scrape answered, then absolute silence fell once more. My hand shook violently. I nearly dropped the phone. Opening the door wasn't even a consideration this time. I killed the recording and bolted back to my apartment. Later, listening back, the audio was chillingly clear. The 3 resonant knocks were captured perfectly. The scraping sound, however, was absent. Still, the knocks were undeniable. Concrete evidence that burrowed deep into my fear. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Each night was a vigil, lying rigid in bed, ears straining for the next inevitable creak, thump, or groan. Sweat beaded on my forehead in the cool darkness. I found myself compulsively checking the hallway through my peephole multiple times a night, half expecting to find 7B's door gaping open again. It remained steadfastly closed. Yet the sense of presence intensified, pressing against the building's fabric, palpable even through solid walls. My stomach remained perpetually knotted. Minor frustrations at work escalated. I snapped at colleagues, ignored calls from friends, retreating into a shell of anxiety. One morning, closer to 2 than 1, thirst pulled me from a fitful doze. Standing in my kitchen, glass of water in hand, I heard it. A soft, tentative knock on my own front door. So faint, I questioned if I'd imagined it. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stood motionless, water forgotten, listening intently. Another knock, equally light. Setting the glass down with exaggerated care, I crept to the door. The peephole, old and clouded, offered little clarity, just a distorted, shadowy form lurking on the other side. I held my breath, silent. Then distinctly, a whisper, sibilant and unintelligible, brushed against the wood from the hallway. A moment passed in absolute stillness. Slowly, cautiously, I unfastened the locks and opened the door a mere crack. The corridor stretched before me, empty, bathed in the usual weak light, thick with that familiar stale, subterranean smell. No one. I secured the locks again, the deadbolt sliding home with unnerving loudness. Sleep was impossible after that. Moving felt like the only sane option, yet my lease held me captive for months more. And what explanation could I offer? My neighbor might be a ghost or something worse. I clung to the possibility of a rational explanation, however thin. An abandoned apartment, misrepresented by the landlord. But Mr. Henderson insisted Mr. Thorne was a legitimate rent-paying tenant. The emptiness I'd witnessed, the footsteps, the moans, the dragging, none of it aligned. A week ago, perhaps, the strangeness escalated further. Returning from work weary, I noticed them. Footprints, damp, distinct outlines on the hallway carpet leading from the elevator bank directly to the door of 7B. The prints were large, masculine, certainly not mine. Kneeling, I touched one. The carpet fibers felt cool and damp beneath my fingers, releasing that same musty grave-like odor I associated with the apartment's interior. I scanned the ceiling and walls for leaks, finding nothing. My gaze followed the trail of prints. They stopped abruptly, perfectly aligned with the threshold of 7B. Standing there, breathing shallowly, a familiar tightness constricting my chest, I noticed it again. The door was slightly ajar. A cold dread, sharp and physical, crawled up my spine. I nudged the door open with the toe of my shoe. It swung inwards without resistance, revealing the familiar vista of empty shadowed rooms. No footprints marred the dusty floor inside. Darkness pooled in the corners. I didn't cross the threshold this time. I simply let the door drift closed and hurried away. The image burned into my mind. That night, the presence felt different, stronger, closer, as if it wasn't merely in 7B, but standing just outside my own door. I huddled on my couch, the television murmuring on low volume, only a single small lamp pushing back the shadows. My gaze kept darting to the door, anticipating movement, the turn of the knob. My hands refused to still. The fine hairs on my arms prickled, a false cold against my sweat-damp skin. Every ambient sound became magnified, menacing. The groan of pipes, the hum of the refrigerator, a distant siren. Around 3 in the morning, it came. A soft, insistent scraping against my door, unnervingly like fingernails tracing the wood grain. I shot upright, rigid, heart hammering. The sound persisted for several seconds, then ceased. I remained frozen on the couch, scarcely daring to breathe, until the first gray hints of dawn filtered through the window blinds. The next day, I confronted Mr. Henderson again. He became immediately defensive. Mr. Thorne pays his rent, Alara. There's no problem with Unit 7B. His tone discouraged further inquiry. Have you actually been inside recently? I pressed, my voice tight. He shrugged, muttering something about tenant privacy, his eyes avoiding mine. He seemed genuinely uncomfortable, or perhaps just eager to end the conversation. I left, defeated, frustration churning with fear in my gut. The urge to simply kick the door in, to confront whatever lay within, warred with the paralyzing terror of what I might actually discover. Now, the short walk from the elevator to my apartment is a gauntlet. Every single time, the sensation is the same. Someone is behind me. A cool whisper of air on the back of my neck. A prickling awareness that tightens my chest. I walk faster. Keys already clutched, fumbling slightly at the lock. My thoughts spiral. What if I can't get inside fast enough? What if it reaches me? An overwhelming compulsion drives me to slam the door shut the instant I'm through, leaning against it, listening. Sometimes I hear it. Faint, indeterminate sounds from the other side. The rustle of fabric, perhaps. A soft, drawn-out sigh or moan. It never lasts long. Then silence. And I remain there, breath ragged, trying to convince myself I'm safe. A few nights passed. Sleep was a distant memory. Around midnight, a tremendous, violent thump slammed against the adjoining wall, powerful enough to make my own pictures rattle. Panic seized me. I threw on clothes, heart pounding erratically, and wrenched open my door. The hallway stretched before me, empty and silent under the humming lights. The door to 7B was shut tight. Standing there, sweat trickling down my temples, I strained to listen. From within 7B came the unmistakable sound of dragging, heavy and rhythmic, punctuated by the clank of what sounded sickeningly like a chain striking the floor. What the hell is going on? The words tore from my throat, thin and shaky. On impulse, I lunged forward and struck the door once, hard, with my fist. Nothing. Silence. Then a second thump erupted from the other side. Sharper, louder, closer. Impacting the door with such force I felt the vibration through the floor and stumbled backward. raw terror propelled me back to my apartment. I slammed the door, locked it, and slid down to the floor. My back pressed hard against the wood. I stayed there for what felt like an hour. Every muscle clenched, mind racing in frantic, useless circles. Sleep did not come that night, nor the next. This is my reality now. Every creak in the hallway sends jolts of adrenaline through me. Every homecoming is steeped in a nauseating dread that settles low in my stomach. My entire existence feels circumscribed by the need to avoid that neighboring door, by the constant exhausting vigilance of looking over my shoulder. Simple comforts, watching television, reading a book, offer no true respite. In the quiet moments, the sounds inevitably return to haunt my thoughts. The dragging chain, the heavy footfalls, the awful, muffled groans. The image of those bare, dusty rooms I glimpsed haunts me. A space declared occupied, yet utterly devoid of life. Or perhaps filled with something else entirely. Leaving is no longer a thought. It's a desperate necessity. The relentless anxiety, the chronic sleep deprivation. I cannot endure it much longer. The chilling certainty that something unseen dogs my steps, brushing against me in the corridor, is eroding my sanity. Some nights, I lie awake, convinced I hear stealthy movement just outside my door, imagining the knob slowly turning, the chain dragging closer across the worn carpet. My chest constricts, my skin turns clammy. I reach for my phone, but who would believe me? My friends would offer platitudes about stress, exhaustion. Maybe they'd be right, but the sounds are real. The perpetually empty, yet occupied, apartment is real. And the presence, the oppressive, watching presence is undeniable. I am counting the days, the weeks, until my lease expires. Until then, each trip down the hallway remains a trial by terror. Keys poised, a breathless dash, the slam of the door, the click of the lock. Then, often, I stand there, ear pressed to the wood, listening to the faint stirrings from next door, wondering with a cold certainty if it is right there, inches away, listening back. I don't use the peephole anymore. The fear of seeing something or someone looking back is too great. I can only hope my resolve holds, that I can gather my belongings and escape this place. Until that day, I live besieged, trapped beside a void that watches, waits, and makes its chilling presence known in the apartment that should be empty, but never ever truly is.